Thank you again, everyone, for joining us here today at CSL Paradise. I want to thank Judy for the introduction and Rod for his beautiful music. Reverend Dan, we could not do this without Reverend Dan on Zoom. And today we have our prayer advocate, Chuck Willis, is here holding high watch for us. So thank you, Chuck, for being here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. My topic today is the sacred pause. So I have a wonderful story that I think represents that. In the 1950s, there were a few highly trained pilots in the US Air Force that were engaged in a life or death task. They attempted to fly at altitudes higher than ever before. The problem they experienced was going beyond the Earth's denser atmosphere. And they found, much to their horror, that the ordinary laws of aerodynamics no longer existed. Tom Wolfe explains in his book, The Right Stuff, that a plane could skid into a flat spin like a cereal bowl on a waxed formica counter and then start tumbling, not just spinning, but tumbling end over end. Can you imagine that? And the first pilots to face this challenge responded, as anyone would, by frantically trying to stabilize the plane. So they applied correction after correction. But the more furiously they manipulated the controls, the wilder the ride became. And they were helpless as they plunged to scream to ground control, "What do I do next?" as they plunged to their death. And so this tragic drama occurred several times until one of the pilots, Chuck Yeager, came upon a solution. When his plane began tumbling, Yeager was thrown violently around the cockpit and he was knocked out. So he was unconscious as he plummeted towards Earth. 7 miles later, the plane re-entered the planet's denser atmosphere where the standard navigation strategies could be implemented. So when he came to, he steadied the plane and landed safely. And what Yeager said is the only way to handle this was to do nothing. You take your hands off of the control and do nothing. This solution, as Tom Wolfe puts it, was the only choice that they had. And it countered all of the training and even basic survival instincts, right? Can you imagine doing nothing while that's happening? Oftentimes we find ourselves in situations similar to the pilots where we cannot control the circumstances, that none of our strategies will work. And we feel helpless and distraught, and we frantically try to manage what's happening. The pandemic was one of those, right? It was a mandatory pause. The universe put the entire planet on a timeout. We were thrust into this global pandemic without a moment's notice. And it's not over yet. We still have a lot to learn about ourselves, how we treat each other, and how we treat the planet. We need to be taking time to stop, reflect, and listen. There's also those times when someone says something hurtful and we so quickly want to respond, or we want to retreat. Or perhaps we make a mistake at work and we scramble to cover it up, or we go out of the way to make up for it. The more we fear failure, the more frantically our bodies and our minds work, right? Like we're frantically trying to, how do I get control of this? And so we fill our days with continual movement, mental planning, worrying, habitual talking, fixing, scratching, adjusting, phoning, snacking, discarding, buying, looking in the mirror. We constantly, frantically trying to fix things, trying to make things work. So, author and spiritual teacher Tara Brach asks a question. She said, what would it be like in the midst of the busyness if we were to consciously take our hands off the controls? What would it be like if we intentionally stopped our mental computations and rushing around for a minute to simply pause and notice our inner experience? Let's take a breath. Taking a breath is always a great place to start, right? We take a breath, we pause, we stop. And so Tara Brach says, learning to pause is the first step in the practice of radical acceptance. And it's the title of her book. A pause is a suspension of activity, a time of temporary disengagement, where we are no longer moving toward a goal, but we take a pause, we take a breath. So a pause could occur during almost any activity. It could last for a minute, for an hour, or for a season in our lives. I know many people, and you might too, that have taken a pause from their education. They take a pause to take a break from education to go to work or to have a family. We may pause to go on a retreat or to spend time in nature or to take a sabbatical. We take a pause. Sometimes it's important to take a personal retreat. I do that on occasion. I'll take time to go away by myself to have a personal retreat and just take that time to stop and reflect. But it's not necessary to go away somewhere. Simply walk outdoors. Take a moment. We were talking about gardening before the service started. It could be as simple as walking into your garden, walking in nature. I visited the other day a beautiful iris garden that had not only irises, but an abundance of all kinds of flowers. And I was with a friend and we just slowly walked through the garden and breathing, chatting, feeling the energy subside, the anxiousness subside, and just feeling ourselves come into a place of calmness. And we felt so relaxed when we left. Wayne Dyer says, everything that's created comes out of silence. Your thoughts emerge from the nothingness of silence. Your words come out of this void. Your very essence emerged from emptiness. All creativity requires some stillness. I love that. All creativity requires some stillness. We have to stop before we allow the next thing to happen, instead of rushing into it. And so in bullfighting, believe it or not, there's an interesting parallel to the pause as a place of refuge and renewal. It is believed that in the midst of a bullfight, a bull can find its own area of safety in the arena. There, the bull reclaims its strength and its power. That place and inner state is called quietencia. As long as the bull remains enraged and reactive, the matador is in charge. But when the bull finds that inner quiet, that place of querencia, he gathers his strength and loses his fear. From the matador's perspective, at this point, the bull is extremely dangerous, for he tapped into his own inner power. And so we may find ourselves in that heated, difficult conversation with someone who's on attack. We've all been there, right? You're in the middle of that and your heart starts racing and your breath is quickened and you're desperately trying to respond to protect ourselves. What do I say? What happened to cause this? Where did this come from? And so we want to protect ourselves. And it's often at that time that we say things out of that place of anxiety that we wish we hadn't. But what if, instead of reacting, what if we stopped and paused? What if we found our own corner of the arena to regain our breath, to take a moment, to think before we respond? Wouldn't that be a complete shift in the experience? Wouldn't that be our own querencia, a moment to tap into our spiritual power? We can create a practice to purposely pause before an activity. Pause before getting out of bed and starting your day. Pause before getting out of the car and wherever it is that you're going to go. Take a pause. We pause when we stop to admire a beautiful flower. I noticed I did at the garden. I stopped and paused, took a breath to smell the fragrance. We stop when we are watching a baby play or playing with a pet, right? We take that pause and enjoy. We're totally in that moment. I find nature is my where I get my power, my renewal, my rest. And when I am in nature or anywhere outdoors, listening to the birds, breathing in the freshness from the forest. And right now, at least here, wherever you are, we're all from all over the different places. But we look at nature, if there's buds or the leaves or the flowers, whatever we're seeing, we take a pause and appreciate it. When you perhaps finish a phone call, take a pause and breathe, giving thanks for the person that you were with. And that's the practice of meditation. Meditation is a pause, right? Meditation allows us to stop all the activity, to stop all the movement, and just be in that moment. Just be in that moment. It's a time to stop and breathe. Take another breath. Meditation is when we stop and we focus on the breath. We still have thoughts in meditation, but we don't hang on to them. We allow them to float by. We don't engage in them. We don't react to them. We allow them to float by. Sometimes you can imagine putting that thought in a balloon and letting that balloon go, or putting the thought in a bubble and letting the bubble fade away. So those are techniques to bring us into the moment, to give us that time to be in that place of meditation, of renewal. And interestingly, grief can also be a pause. When we grieve, sometimes we step out of the flow of life. We allow tears and loss, sorrow and remembrance. I was aware of this week because a friend passed that I just very much admired. And so I noticed allowing that grief, it's one of the most powerful gifts we can give ourselves. Oftentimes, and I know I've done this in the past, is we want to fight it. We want to get grief over with. And let's move on. I'm tired of grieving. Let's move on. But the most powerful place is in the pause. When we allow ourselves to grieve, to experience the loss, we become grounded in the moment and we move into that sacred space. And we've been through grief with the pandemic. I know this center has lost some very dear ones recently. And grief is just not limited to the loss of a loved one. Grief could be loss of a job, a skill, a relationship. The important thing is to pause and acknowledge all that's gone on. Instead of hurrying to do the next thing, that's what we do in this life, don't we? We just hurry to the next thing. Hurry up. Let's move on. Let's get the next thing, the next place, whatever we're going to do. Hurry up and move on. Instead, when we take that opportunity to breathe, to connect, it makes such a huge difference. Ernest Holmes says, "Guard well this garden of the mind. It is God's garden of your soul. Go often into your garden. Sit under your tree of life in a cool, quiet communion, and you will find fresh inspiration." And that's what we did in the meditation today, is just allow ourselves to imagine ourselves being a butterfly just floating through a beautiful garden. Find that garden of your mind, find that place for yourself where you are renewed. Because oftentimes when we're in a hurry, it's a sign that we're not grounded in faith. And when we have faith and we trust in something greater than ourselves, and then we're willing to take a pause. And so there are 3 stages of faith. Hope is the beginning stage. And hope is a sense of doubtful expectation. We hope something good will happen, but underneath there's some lingering doubts and fears. And those usually are our beliefs. And they form some anxiety called waiting, right? We're waiting for the next person, for the next job, for waiting for our boss or our spouse to change, waiting for things to get better. It's always someone else we're waiting for to change, right? Emma Curtis Hopkins says, "If we examine doubt a little more closely, we shall see that it's not doubt of the good at all. It is a fear that the good won't work now." Isn't that the truth? It's the fear that the good won't work now. I won't have it now. And so then trust is the second stage. And so we begin to develop trust, and our doubts and our fears begin to diminish, and we have more peace, and we build trust in the creative process of life. So trust is that transitional stage between hope and the ultimate outcome of good. Reverend Lloyd Strom states, "The anxiety of waiting is replaced by the grace of patience, which is a calm certainty that something good is happening to us in the present moment, despite any appearance to the contrary." You see, waiting, remember, is the activity of fear, but patience is the expression of love. And what takes us to that place? Gratitude. We talked about gratitude last week a little bit. Gratitude is the third stage, and it's the acknowledgement that something good is happening in our lives. We're grateful for the good that is revealed. But what if we could be grateful for the good that has not been revealed? I'm grateful knowing that this idea, this project, this activity is revealed with ease and completed with ease and grace. Being grateful is a step in faith, right? It allows us to take a pause and reflect on the good that is coming. Eric Butterworth says in his book from Spiritual Economics, gratitude is not a reactionary emotion, but a causative energy. You do not need something to be grateful. You need only the desire to feel grateful and gratitude. And so CSLParadise is in a sacred pause. The board hired me as interim minister to help evaluate where the center is at, to facilitate any healing, and to examine what's needed to go forward. So we're together, we're taking a pause to reflect, to recharge, and to renew. But I'm not here to do it alone, and the board can't do it alone. It takes all of us doing it together. It takes all of you. Your presence is essential. The board is responsible for the financial well-being of the center, but it's the members, all of us together, that make up the center. You know, we learned, I don't know about you, but I learned in the time of the pandemic that church is not about a building, right? It's not about a building, that it's that each person contributes to the collective. And what we most love about church is this opportunity for all of us to be together, to grow and to learn together, to connect. And so your commitment to be present, to participate, and to contribute to the future. So we're going to be building on our community time after the service. And I know, I agree with how most of us feel, that it's really frustrating to not see each other in person. But for this moment in time, this is where we're at. And in Zoom, we get to connect and see each other. And this is the opportunity to share and to stay connected. This is a time in our community time after the service. You can ask any questions about the center or spiritual questions about our topic. Once a month, I'm going to be offering a short lesson on expanding on my talk. And I want to hear your suggestions. What would you like to hear? What would you like to learn more about? And I would like to meet with each of you. There's a link in the newsletter to set up an appointment for a Zoom meeting with me. Please take advantage of that. I'd love to meet with you individually to find out, what are your likes and dislikes? What does the center mean to you? What do you want going forward? Please respond to the membership letter that was sent to you. I'm going to be helping the board make decisions as we move forward. And we want you to be included in the process. And when you are a member and have returned your membership letter, then we know we can count on you. I think we've learned in basic foundations that when we commit to something, we're telling the universe that we're trusting the process. I commit, I agree, I know something greater is being revealed. And so it supports us individually and all of us collectively, that we deepen together in faith. When we have faith, we have a willingness to receive. And when we are in the midst of turmoil, we know we can take a breath and something greater is revealed. We trust the process, we trust the universe, we trust the activity of spirit within each of us. We surrender into the process. And I love this quote from Marianne Williamson. She says, "To the ego mind, surrender means giving up. But to the spiritual mind, surrender means giving in and receiving, letting go and receiving, allowing and receiving. So I know as human beings, we don't like not to know the answer, right? We want to know what's next. We don't like to wonder, because usually it's not for our highest good, wonder what's going to happen next. But if we live in faith, if we can take this sacred pause and surrender, we know that God's got this. I don't have to know how. I'm just willing to receive. I'm willing to rest in that trust. And so let's just take this into prayer. How grateful I am for this time together, for this opportunity to be in community, and to know that we've moved past the hope stage into the trust stage, and that we are grounded in gratitude and know something magnificent is being revealed. Something magnificent is being revealed for each one of us, individually and collectively. And that this good, this expansion of God as love and peace, freedom and joy is amazing, and it is as close as the breath that each of us breathes. It is that lifting us up into the greater good, into the greater allowing of spirit. How grateful I am for all of this. And so I give thanks for each of these beloveds. I know that as we go out into the world this week, that each of us is blessed beyond measure. Each of us feels that place of gratitude, of trust, and of faith. And together we know that we make a difference. And so how grateful I am for all of this. And I release this word. And together we affirm. And so it is.